Hello friends, welcome to A Gentle Healing Journey. My name is Rain Francis, and on this channel I talk about how to deal with life's struggles and challenges. This video is part of my series about why we stay in emotionally abusive relationships. But of course, this could also apply to any type of abusive situation. Today I'm going to talk about the third reason why we stay: shame and judgment. Now, this subject is very close to my heart because for this very reason, I stayed quiet for far too many years. I felt shame because I was told that the reason for his bad behavior was because of me. I felt judged because when I opened up to someone for the very first time, I was given some bad advice and asked, why didn't I just leave? You know, when you're already feeling anxious and shameful and someone you think you can trust judges you, oh my gosh, it makes you silent because you're afraid nobody will ever understand what's really happening to you. And more often than not, people don't really understand the layers of being in a long-term abusive relationship. You know, if we'd been dating short-term, living separately, not owning pets together, not financially and emotionally entangled, sure, I would have just left. That still would have been devastating, but it would have been a lot easier. And this is why I'm doing this series, to promote awareness of what it's actually like when you're in an abusive, intimate partner relationship and why you stay. So let's talk about shame. Firstly, the definition of shame is when you think you're a bad person, either because of your own thought process or because of what other people have drilled into you. In an abusive relationship, there is shaming from the abuser, but there's also self-shame that the victim punishes themselves with. Shame causes victims to stay in harmful relationships because it makes them feel so bad about themselves. And they really don't want other people to know what's going on. When you're consistently shamed, you start to feel like you're worthless and not valued, that you must somehow be so messed up that you're the reason why your partner is abusing you. As your partner is systematically shaming you for whatever shame du jour it is, you also start to shame yourself. You may ask yourself, why am I such an idiot for staying with this person? What's wrong with me? Why can't I be strong and just leave? Self-punishment, right? But it becomes part of your inner dialogue. You also feel ashamed because you don't want friends and family to know the truth. And this silence creates more shame. I read a term called a prison of shame recently, and to me that describes shame in an emotionally abusive relationship just perfectly. It is a prison of shame. You feel trapped, and that spiral of shame just continues to whirl around until you're basically beaten down mentally, physically, and emotionally. When you get to that level, you have no energy to even think about leaving. There's also shame for not having the guts to stand up to your abuser. But this is complicated because many abusers will not allow you to stand up to them. And by allow, I mean they make it so difficult on you and shame you so much that you make a decision not to stand up for yourself anymore because it's just not worth it. But this isn't healthy either if you're still in the relationship, because whether you know it or not, by not defending yourself, this causes you to feel even more ashamed. It's like that shame prison has locked you up. Your freedom is gone. You have very few choices. You feel trapped and powerless. And a lot of the times you kind of just give up. I don't know how many times I said the words, it's just not worth it. At the beginning of the relationship, we were happy. It wasn't until about the second year together that he started to really show signs of abuse. But he always had an excuse and an apology and promises to work on it. And because I was very much in love with him, I believed it and I forgave him. I did notice that when there was a good possibility of me leaving him, he tried harder. What I mean by that is, even though we were living together, we both had our own separate incomes. So if I wanted to leave him, it would never have been an issue for me financially. At that point, at the start of our relationship, we didn't share pets. We didn't share a home or bills. I could have left very freely on my own. But when things started to get more serious, or so I thought, more committed to a long life together, that's when he stopped working at it. We'd already signed a long-term lease, and we'd already adopted more pets together, and we'd moved to a very remote area in the mountains. Everything was in my name because I had the better credit score. I didn't mind because I thought, well, we're partners. And I thought that it would never matter whose name was on what bill, but it did matter. Once we were all set up, he decided to stop working. All the financial responsibilities were on me. And because I was too ashamed to even admit to myself that this was not what I'd signed up for, I kept quiet and I accepted it, and I became house poor. House poor is when you can pay the bills, but not much else. I was tied to a long-term lease, and the abuse started to get more frequent and much more intense. I'm a very strong and independent woman, but I really lost myself in that relationship. I became scared and anxious and a doormat. That was part of my shame. And I was very good at putting up a front so that nobody could even guess what was going on. I started a blog back in 2017, I think it was. I stopped posting there last year, but I recently went back to the older blog posts. I was looking for some pictures that I wanted to use, and I got caught up in reading some of those blog posts. And I often had mentioned that my late husband was such an amazing person. He was the best guy in the world. And to his credit, a lot of the times he was the best guy in the world. So I came across one comment back in 2018 on one of those blog posts when the abuse was at its absolute worst. Up until then, I should say, because it started to get bad again in 2021. Anyway, the comment said something like, oh my gosh, Rain, he's definitely a keeper. I looked at the date of that post and that comment, and I felt shame. I felt shame for lying, for making my relationship out to be some kind of fairy tale romance, for going out of my way to make him look like the most loving and respectful man in the world. I felt that shame coming back because the reality is, and I'm going to be very transparent here, I was suicidal during that time. I posted that blog post just about a week after a very explosive abuse incident. I don't even know how it started or what it was all about, but what I do remember is sitting on my bed, head down and crying, while he demeaned me, criticized, yelled, called me every name in the book. He'd been standing in front of me blocking the door, and I endured it for what seemed like hours. It was probably just a few minutes, but I remember the last thing he said before I ended up pushing him out of the way and running down the stairs. He said, you know, Rain, you think you're a good person, but you're not. You're bad. I remember running down the stairs, and he chased me down the stairs and out of the house, calling me terrible names. I just grabbed my car keys and I drove to the mountain. And I climbed it, and I walked to an area that had been taped off. It was a cliff edge. I was ready to end it. I couldn't take it anymore. The abuse, the shame, the feeling of being trapped. And I remember calling out to Spirit, please just give me a reason to turn around. And I remember hearing a dog barking in the distance. I don't think it was one of mine, but I heard it. And I realized, my gosh, my dogs need me. I can't leave them with him. He doesn't have the means to take care of them. I felt very beaten down at that point. I slowly turned around, and it took me about twice as long to descend that mountain side as it did for me to climb it, just because I didn't want to go back home. But I knew I had to. My dogs needed me. I couldn't afford to break my lease. He refused to move. I was stuck, and it was terribly depressing. Now, I mentioned before that shame was like a prison. It's locked you up. Your freedom is gone. You have very few choices left. You feel trapped and powerless. And a lot of the times, you just give up. Well, in 2018, I nearly permanently gave up. But that incident also made me realize that I couldn't be silent anymore. When I got home that day, he was locked away in his office and giving me the silent treatment. But it was for days, but he was listening to everything I was doing. I had decided to call a social worker and make an appointment. The morning that I had planned to go to see the social worker, he finally came out of his office and he shamed me. He said he knew what I was up to, and that if I wanted to lie to strangers about us, it just proved again how bad of a person I was. Then he said really angrily, "We don't air our dirty laundry in public ever. Do you know who I tell about our relationship problems? Nobody." That's what he said, and then he walked away back to his office and closed the door. So even when I was trying to get help for myself, after coming so close to ending my life, I decided to cancel that appointment. His shaming technique worked, at least for the time being. If you follow my channel, you know that my late husband took his life in May of 2025 when I asked for a separation. Just this month, I started to go through boxes in the basement to sort things out and kind of declutter. I came upon a box of books that I had completely forgotten about. They were all self-help books, and they were aimed at women to restore their relationships and make their marriages work. When I looked at some of these titles of the books, I honestly had no recollection of buying them. But I'd written notes in them, and seeing those notes just reaffirmed to me that it wasn't my fault. He'd conditioned me into believing that the health and happiness of our relationship was solely my own responsibility. He had me believing that his abusive behavior was, in fact, my fault. The worst part of discovering these books, I had a book called How to Be a Better Person. Doesn't that just kind of break your heart a little bit? After years of him telling me that I was a bad person, I actually bought a book on how to be a better person. I mean, okay, yes, that kind of advice is always good for any kind of self-development, but that's not why I bought it. I truly believed that I was a bad person, and I was ashamed of myself. Shame creates a lack of boundaries. When you feel ashamed of yourself, you struggle to assert yourself, to speak up about what you need or what you desire or what you don't like. There's always that underlying fear that whatever you ask for or whatever you want to really talk about is not going to be received well. And you'll either get raged at, criticized, made fun of, or ignored and rejected. So again, you stay silent and you tolerate. And as a result, you become more ashamed. Not only that, but you stop trying to communicate. You just go along with whatever your partner says. And maybe you start to seek validation from other sources. In my case, it was the blogging community. I really loved my fellow bloggers, and I dove right into that social media world of blogging, and then eventually into YouTube, where I am now, because I felt so alone. But I didn't want anyone to know. Just a note, I'm not on YouTube now for that kind of validation because I've worked through the shame and I am no longer silent. But that's a very real way that I tried to find self-worth again. And as for the judgment side of things, that kind of goes hand in hand with shame. Often we feel shame towards ourselves. We're very harsh in judging our own behavior and our thoughts and our words. This adds to the shame spiral that becomes like that prison where we feel trapped. But if we talk about trying to find support, there is a fear of judgment there. When an abuse victim finally gathers up the courage to speak to someone about what's going on, it's really risky. They may feel like nobody would believe them, likely because they've been told by their partners that same thing. Maybe your abusive partner is respected in your community or has a very, very high-ranking job in his company or her company, or they act like the hero at family gatherings. If you tell anyone that they've been abusive to you, you risk not being believed. I was watching a show about abusive relationships the other day, and one person was talking about how her partner went on this smear campaign preemptively, making her out to be distrustful, unstable, and manipulative. Her partner even used that boring cliche, "Hell hath no fury like a woman scorned." Her partner did this to ensure that if she ever reached out to her family or her friends, that they wouldn't believe her. They would doubt her. And this ensured that she wouldn't try to leave her partner. It's so manipulative and harmful. I mean, there also might be passive-aggressive or dismissive judgment. If you open up to a friend or family member, they may say something like, "Oh, he can't be that bad. He seems like a great guy." Boom. Judgment. When it comes to judgment, I mean, we all do it. It's a fact, like it's a safety mechanism, and it's ingrained in us. When we first meet a person, we tend to judge them to keep ourselves in a safe place. We judge them on their words, maybe on their appearance, and maybe their actions. That's normal. But in abusive relationships, our partners often judge us. So as abuse victims, we not only fear the judgment of others, which in turn keeps us silent, we fear the judgment of our partners, the person we fell in love with. When a person criticizes someone else, that person feels in control and superior, and often it boosts their ego. And it's usually based on their own low self-esteem and lack of confidence. Or it could be based on envy. If your partner is focusing on all of the good stuff that's happening to you, and they're feeling envious or jealous about it, they can judge you quite harshly. And this is based on their insecurities and maybe their unfulfilled dreams. They see you shining, feeling envious or jealous, and they need to knock you down a little bit to make themselves feel better. There were times when my late husband criticized me a lot about my commitment to my YouTube channels. I was and still am so proud when I get a new subscriber. I would show him. He would feign interest and say something like, "See that?" pointing to the subscriber count. "Mine never moves." And then he'd walk away. And he'd say it in such a way that it would burst my bubble. He didn't congratulate me. He wasn't proud of my accomplishment. He never acknowledged the hours of work involved in having even one YouTube channel. I have 4. He just made it about him, and he said something very derisive. So I eventually stopped sharing because I didn't want to feel that bubble burst anymore. I was and am proud of the work that I put up on all of my channels, and to have someone who I love try to dim that shine and pride and my accomplishment, that's so hurtful and disappointing, so you stop communicating. Now, judgment also comes from the victim-blaming stigma in our society. Why did they stay so long? That reinforces that the victim must have somehow done something to deserve the abuse. This kind of judgment creates even more silence and shame. And in some cultures, reaching out for help could cause the victim's family and their friends to shun them, pressure them to work it out, or maybe even blame them for not trying hard enough to fix things. And I'll tell you something. When you feel that judgment, it's a powerful silencer. Now, I've told this story before, but there was a time back in 2023 when I called the police because he was threatening me and trying to intimidate me. I felt very fearful of him that night, and I remember asking him, "Could you just cool down and back off and let me sleep?" He continued to just glare at me, and he said, "No, you're going to have a hard time sleeping tonight." Now, unless you were there in my home, in that room that night, I don't think you could actually understand the dread and fear that I felt being with him alone in this house. He'd taken my phone away too, and I had no link to anyone, no way to call for help. I finally got my phone back and I ran to the bathroom and I called the police. When they arrived, he lied to them. I was crying and they didn't believe me. One of the officers said, "You know, we can only do something if he hits you." not if he stares at you. Not only was that humiliating, I felt judged. And granted, I know that police officers have certain protocols that they have to follow, and that these protocols often fail when it comes to emotional and verbal abuse. And by that, I mean the protocols fail the victim. And that's how I felt, judged, humiliated, shamed, and helpless. And I remember saying to my late husband that night, okay, you win, but I don't want to be with you anymore. And I slept well that night. But of course, I fell for the love bombing the next few days and weeks and months. And I stopped asking for help from the police. I told myself, well, you know what, Rain, this is your lot in life. Better get used to it. Of course, as you know, I was able to change that mindset because I finally found people who believed me and they didn't judge me. And finding that support, oh boy, that gave me strength and courage to speak up, to learn more, and to stand up for myself, and to finally tell him in 2025 that I wanted to separate until he got help for his anger and abusive behavior. So, my friends, that is the third reason why we stay in these abusive relationships: shame and judgment. That seemingly unending cycle that forces you into a prison of shame, where you feel trapped and very alone. In my next video in this series that will be coming out next week, I'll discuss children and pets as to why we stay in intimate partner relationships that are harmful and abusive. Until then, my friends, thank you so much for watching. Please be well, and I'll see you next time. Bye.